Hi, Greg. I guess Jackie and Jacob too. I'll send this email, kind of a video overview of some data for you guys to look over and think about what to test next. Um, I had the luxury, I guess the last time Greg had, maybe the last time it was at your place, or maybe even Greg emailed it to me, but the data from Peterborough, maybe I was helping you guys out in Peterborough at that time, but this is the data from Peterborough, which is a good, back the last time that we raced there, which was 2019, which is a good kind of benchmark test to just look at, okay, how's the boat performing compared to then? So start speed is a huge thing in terms of, so looking at all of these numbers here, you can see there's some variation. Some of these runs are technically illegal, but I would say start speed is probably the biggest advantage you can gain over your competitor is by nudging them into the start speed. But Greg, you already knew that. I don't know. I'm pretty sure the weight you were running in Outlaw at that time was 1250. Now I don't know if the boat weighs any different. I know you changed the batteries out, but you did 4 runs back then on Saturday and 3 runs on Sunday. I don't know. I think on Saturday the GPS wasn't working, and then I probably fixed it. And then on Sunday, I think you had good GPS data. So I don't know what happened between then and now. Someone else reconfigured that, but the good news is all the data you have now, the GPS is fixed, so you don't need to wait on a sensor or buy a new sensor. So typical to like a drag strip, you got 30 feet, 60 feet, 330, 500, 660, and 800. So these are the times to get to all of these distances. And obviously there's a start speed here that's going to influence, okay, if you start at a higher speed, you're going to have some advantage in the beginning of the track. Before we look at any of this, I want to look at, okay, your ECU settings back then. I know you're using a map that's pretty, or it's one that Rob liked a lot back then. Um, I don't know, or it's a good map. It'll run good. It works good on your boat. But you're running between 104 and 105. The important thing is your peak speed and peak RPM and peak speed here. So you're going between or just over 10,000, about 10,700 here, and anywhere between 95 and 199 miles an hour in 800 feet. And here are the intake air temps. So one thing that you could quickly check is the prop you ran on Saturday. If you look at the ratio between RPM and speed, this is one prop here. So it's 103 RPM per mile an hour, this particular prop. So all the stuff here. The second prop is actually slightly shorter. Um, so you have 108 RPM per mile an hour, which it's about 6 to 7% shorter. Okay, and I'm pretty sure if we look at the runs you did on Sunday in the morning and the afternoon, so this past Sunday, meaning on your lake here, so September 24th. The first prop you did was the prop you ran on Saturday in Peterborough. I'm pretty sure, just based on this ratio. And then the second prop test that you did was the shorter prop. In general, I see looking at hundreds of people's data, it's pretty rare that the taller prop that goes faster top end ever yields any benefit, in my opinion. It's always the short track that wins the race. It's pretty rare that someone's hitting terminal velocity, and I'd say, you know what, you could benefit from a bigger prop. It's all about managing the smaller prop and getting it to hook up properly. So peak acceleration force here is like how many G's of acceleration you're pulling. You can see there's a lot of variation, except especially in an Allison with a trim timer, you're not as consistent as an STV because some launches you're good, some launches you're sawing the wheel, some launches it's not launching straight. But the EGTs left and right, I don't know if you've changed those probes or not. Slightly different in terms of temperatures. The right bank is definitely colder. I don't know if you just started the motor up with pretty much like no checks. I mean, you probably stored it correctly, but the injectors could be slightly different. The fuel that you're using, I know it's Sunoco Supreme now, so that'll influence. I don't know if that's what you're using back then. You might have been using C12, but they're pretty similar. Let's say you were pretty much. I think you're running the ECU too rich, anyways, for what you were testing here, but you're just testing the race settings on kill mode. I would dial this back to like 98 in full kill mode. Anyways, let's look at some of the times here. In general, this was your best pass here. I think you were facing Archer in this particular run here back in Peterborough, and you actually beat it just by a small amount with the shorter prop. Okay, you weren't able to really beat it here. Your first pass, surprisingly, well, I mean, this is your first pass on Sunday. I know you tested on Thursday. You didn't have any GPS there, but they were also pretty similar to this. I'm pretty surprised how the first test hit you did, you only did like 500 feet, but you pretty much did like a pretty decent pass. So that's good to know. Um, so here are your times. It's all color coded so that the worst numbers are red and the better numbers are green. So you can easily see, okay, well, if I start faster, I end at a lower time, which is obvious. But comparing, let's say this one to this one here, you can see that you're slightly better by like half a tenth of a second, which is slightly, it's kind of the start speed. It's not fair to compare a run where you started slower and to a run with a different prop. But we can look at all this stuff in more detail on the AIM setup. The question of the hour, I guess, would be, well, are these times competitive? Will you win a Jasper? I'll be totally honest with you. I think there's one or two other customers that I've seen faster times in this. But as far as an XR goes, this year you're pretty much bang on for where you need to be, and everything is still as fast as it was 4 years ago now. So that's good to know. Um, but I mean, the batteries don't seem to like. We'll look at that in a little bit more detail. But yeah, you're going to be competitive. You're going to be podium potentially. I think you're only getting better as you were driving the day. So I mean, I would go with the shorter prop in my opinion. You're revving the piss out of the engine. You're 10,700, almost 10,800 at 100 miles an hour. So most of the top Allisons I see in your class are slightly slower top end than you. You're really running top speed pretty good. The 30 and 60 foot are just better on those boats. So I don't know if that's the skid planer that you have. I haven't really looked at your boat in like really amazing detail if it's a trim timer, but yeah, I mean, really, it's seat time at the end of the day doing these two things. So, or the 30 and 60 foot. If you're trying to compare these numbers to other people, it's going to be dramatically different, just because the way that they start timing is pretty much optimistic. It's where you decide to actually time. So one of the things I will show you now, these are, well, if we jump back here actually quickly. So your best run on the Saturday from Peterborough is blue and green for the Sunday. So that's two different props. And then similarly, red and yellow are now. So your best run with the taller prop and then the shorter prop is the yellow one. So yellow is your outright best run. So we'll look at that now. And if we align these, you can see that the way the motor flashes up onto once you floor the gas here, you're revving like right out of the hit, like almost 7,000 with the shorter prop like 7,300 here, 70 yeah almost 7,300. So it was actually responding a lot better, which is interesting. It's if I look at the fuel curve here, um, the mapping is it's not identical, so I don't know if you reflash the ECU here, but it's pretty close. Okay, I don't think you were in full kill mode. The initial hit here is lazy because it's richer. Okay, so you can kind of see these numbers here for injection time are higher. So more than likely someone remapped the ECU between, or you're using a different ECU between then and now. Otherwise, this is just changes in atmospherics. But I'll show you as far as so that was RPM. Manifold pressure is an interesting thing. So I don't know what you had going on before. If you had um, maybe a stuck vacuum line or something like that, but you're kind of driving into the line here with vacuum. So this number here now, I'll hide RPM really quick. All of these lines here are engine vacuum here. So let's just say lower numbers are more vacuum. I'll bring back the RPM just so you get an idea. The moment you smack the throttle, it goes to pretty much atmospheric, no vacuum. The old runs from Peterborough in 2019, you pretty much had atmospheric the whole way. So from fuel economy perspective, it's pretty bad, but it's fine. I don't know if the vacuum fitting was bunged up, or I know Rob Twy will like to run a restrictor pill inside the vacuum line, so that makes a difference there. I don't know what you're running currently, if it's just a Tygon going directly to the intake, but halfway through the run at about 8,000 RPM here, it starts to draw vacuum on the way the motor's set up now in 2023, which is weird. So I don't know if there's some issue with the reads. Is it having an influence on the performance? Not really. Like you're outright. Once again, I can't compare to the GPS here because those other ones don't have it, but doesn't really make that big of a difference. Okay. So comparing now, I'll turn that off. The other thing you probably want to know is, okay, how does the RPM compare between the two props? So these are the two props that you've been running. So in the morning of September 24th, so red and yellow. Okay, your best run here is red, and the next, the one below it is yellow. Okay, so how do these two props compare? They're about 6% different, but right pretty much across the board here. You can see the moment you smack the throttle, one of them goes to 62, 6300, the other one goes about to 6600. And then as you start to speed up, it kind of cavitates and slips the clutch up to about 7500, and then it hooks up for the rest of the run. But you're carrying about another 500 RPM at a given speed. It kind of tapers off as you go faster, maybe about 300, but it's slipping a lot more with the shorter prop. Okay, so part of that's a diameter cup. I don't know what these props look like. I'm just telling you what the numbers say. So personally, I would go with the taller, or sorry, the shorter prop, the yellow one here, the second one that you ran. If you look at the longitudinal acceleration, you can kind of see that just because I think well, this has to do slightly with start speed too, but the yellow one doesn't hit immediately as hard just because you're starting slightly faster. And I honestly think it cavitates a bunch coming out, but once it starts to hook up, you get all this extra area here compared to the red line. Okay, and one thing that's interesting, I guess, with an Allison, especially the launch on the trim timer, it matters. It matters a bunch. And an SDV, it's not as critical, let's say, but the way that these blips happen on your boat, like you got a lot smoother with the second prop towards the end of Sunday, so that's good to see. Towards the end, I don't know what happened here, but without video, it's hard for me to tell. But you were some wave, some wind, something caused this blip here, but I would easily take all this extra area here in terms of acceleration. All that kind of makes sense. Your battery voltages looked okay. If we compare the voltage sag with your new lithium batteries, which I'm assuming you're running, so this is what we want to look at now. So the blue and green are the old batteries, the old voltages. So when you hit the trim, they don't really change that much. But now they drop about zero point 0.2 volts. It's a lighter battery. There's less reserve cranking or reserve amperage. So that's to be expected. But it has no effect on the ECU, or doesn't look like it has an effect on the trim. But whatever you did to the ECU, it definitely is making the RPMs climb faster initially off the hit. It's leaner, definitely leaner right off the hit. You can see that here. I would say that's good. Okay, so you have about, and part of that I think is the fact that for some reason you're back in Peterborough, you weren't having your vacuum signal correct to the ECU. It could have been plugged up with just oil and shit. It could have been. I'll look through here on the bottom. It looks like the sensor was actually working on the ECU, so that doesn't seem to be a problem. But yeah, the with with that much vacuum drawn that you have now, it's hitting a lot harder, which is good because it's not the crankcase isn't full of excess fuel. So yeah, I guess just to summarize, time wise, 8.2 and 800 feet, the way that I measure, which is pretty much consistent for everything I've done for the past, I don't know, 15 years, is a good time. It's podium worthy if you just replicate that realistically. The shorter prop is better. I'd really like to see a trim angle sensor on the boat, just so that you can compare and kind of rule out differences that you're seeing here in start speed. Obviously, some of the 60-foot and 30-foot times are going to vary depending on your starting trim angle and the settings you have in your trim timer. But the way the boat kind of revs up here, when you first smack the throttle, especially, that makes a huge difference. So the way it's kind of, let's say, cavitating here, is really dependent on the trim timer, and obviously I don't have that information here. As far as your water pressure goes, they're almost all identical. We can look at that here. The motor hasn't changed very much. Obviously, it's an Allison, so it's pretty erratic. But you're starting at about 3 and you're ending at about 8. The fuel pressure looks perfect across the board. And then the EGTs are pretty similar on the port bank here. You can see the starting obviously is different, but on the starboard bank, it's slightly different between one and the other. And that could just be the injectors sitting for 4 years. It could be a gasket that's slightly weeping. It could be the sensor that's got some fouling on it. So, but they're consistent. Okay, that's the part that matters. So yeah, that's 15 minutes of talking. So hopefully you can digest some of that. If you have any questions, I'll leave this here at the end so you can just kind of digest it. I'll send you a screenshot of this as well. Um, but yeah, the trim timer, or sorry, the trim sensor, so you can really optimize the trim timer would be something I'd recommend. And then, um, yeah, just looking at some of the tidying up some of the driving, which I think will come with time. You only have 10 or 15 passes since you started using the boat again. So looks good overall. 10,800 at 100 miles an hour and 800 feet is nothing to sneeze at. So congrats on that. And yeah, we'll talk soon.